Tenants podcast. I get to sit across from Maurice today. We're going to do our introductions here. I'm very excited that he's able to join us and answer a lot of the questions that I personally have, and I know a lot of the callers that I get through my lead sources have a lot of questions. I think that coming directly to you, Maurice, is going to be a great way to start. But I want to start with something fun. Maurice, can you tell me how you got to this chair, how you started working for the city of Schenectady, what your role is? Can you just break it down for us as to why do I think you're one of the most important people to have sit across from me today?
I don't think I'm the person, but so Maurice Brown III, I'm the homeownership coordinator for the city of Schenectady. In layman's terms, I guess the easiest way to describe it would be my job is to assist the city with any of its efforts to increase homeownership and housing-related issues that may come about. So that's not to be mistaken for any kind of legal advice or anything like that. I don't deal with those things. But different projects that we may be looking at. One of the huge resources that the city ends up having is the properties that we take through foreclosure due to unpaid taxes for several years. So a lot of times we'll utilize those properties in order to partner with other organizations for what we would call a development project. And those development projects end up being things to assist with either affordable homeownership or affordable rentals like that.
Okay.
And then any other side projects, community outreach that we're looking to do. If it's housing and home related, then that's when I step into. So there's a few different grant programs that we work with. And then there's also the sale of the city-owned property, which I think in our capacity of dealing with each other, that's what you probably reference the most.
Absolutely. That's the one that I get calls on all the time.
Well, yeah, you're a realtor.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple there's this one that just went under contract or is now in the stages to becoming. And I want to talk about, the process of, hey, here's an offer that's been, partially accepted. I want to get into that. But I had no less than 24 calls in 10 days on the same Cary Street property. And I do want to get into what the pitfalls are and whatnot. But if, let's say the city has taken a property, actually, let's start from the very beginning. You have a property that's not paying taxes. From that information alone, please tell me how it gets in the hands of a real estate agent like myself, and then how we get the house in the hands of an end user.
Okay. So essentially what happens, and this part is largely handled by our attorneys, right? So if you're not paying your taxes for several years, and it's based on like a state law that forces the city to act in a lot of those situations, as in the city of Schenectady, which is a little bit different than some communities, we're the foreclosing entity on the property. So if you have unpaid taxes, it goes through to the lawyers. They review the list of those properties. Sometimes then they will send like a notice out to all of those people that are on that list usually. And it happens almost like a year before they actually physically take a property.
And it doesn't happen on the first 6 months of being late. It's a multi-year. It's lots of warnings.
It's based on liens, and liens are only per year type of thing.
Okay.
So like if you're 2 to 3 liens in, there's a very real possibility that you could be in that situation. And so that means essentially 2 or more years someone's not paying their taxes at all.
2 or more years. And then once those notices go out, there's probably almost a year is what you're saying before the city starts the...
Almost a year, yeah.
Almost a
year.
So
there's the city has no interest in trying to take someone's home from them, right?
Absolutely.
So our attorneys, and you're familiar with some of them like Andrew.
Absolutely.
And
Andrew's
what they
great.
do is they make every attempt to get you the ability to be able to pay it off and move forward.
Now, if someone doesn't have the ability to pay off a property, they still own the property. It just has liens on it, like a mortgage. They have any ability to sell that property.
Yeah,
so they walk away with something other than saying, "Hey, unfortunately, time is up."
Yeah,
City now takes the property, and that's it.
Yeah. So for you to pay your taxes, so when you buy or sell a property, and there's taxes there. Usually in that transaction is when someone might pay it off. So if I'm super behind on my taxes and I go to sell it, then through the sale of those proceeds can also, a portion of that can be used to pay off the taxes so that property is free and clear for the next owner.
I really think that people who get behind and get bogged down with back taxes or near a foreclosure action, either through a bank or through a tax foreclosure action, they feel like they have no choice. And they're just going to ride the time until it's over.
Oh, yeah, they panic.
I've seen plenty of places that I could have sold easily before the city took it, and those owners now, before they lost full and total control of the property, they could have gotten something out of it.
Yeah, I think it usually comes down to probably like two situations. One, you could have a person who just honestly doesn't know what their options are, and no matter what information that they could potentially look up, like we are in the information age, so yeah, you could Google most things.
Yep.
And you could get some very real answers on there, or at least a starting point. I think that a lot of people get caught up with the emotion about the situation.
Oh, yeah.
And then therefore they kind of just become paralyzed.
Yep.
Then you have some people who are, for lack of a better way of saying, become kind of hard-headed with it. It's like, I don't want to give up my property. So they're going to try everything in their power in order to save it for every slither of a hope. And, sometimes that works out. Sometimes it doesn't. So it's the same situation that if someone's being evicted is going through emotionally and mentally.
Yep.
It's the same situation if all your student loans come due at the same time. When it comes to debts, we as human beings, if there is a hope that we don't have to lose something, we're going to try.
Sure.
And often it takes you having someone else who's kind of slightly outside of the situation, maybe some type of professional, an attorney or somebody like that, to kind of like bring you down to earth on, hey, these are your realistic options for you to choose between.
Yep.
What's upsetting is like because some people never seek help earlier on, they get in that situation. Right now there's foreclosure programs where there's counseling involved in that. So if you're under the threat of foreclosure, you're thinking like, this is a very real possibility for me. You can start talking. You can even before then, even if you think it may be an issue for you in the future, because you're a little bit behind. You can always talk to a housing counselor of some sort. The city actually does fund programs for that. Like some of the grant money we get into the city goes to those types of nonprofits. So like an example would be Better Community Neighborhoods Incorporated or BCNI, because we love acronyms.
Yeah, I've used them before, and they were the determining factor for getting a client to get a house.
Yeah.
Right here in the city of Schenectady.
Yeah, so they help home buyers.
Yep.
They help existing homeowners, especially
I didn't know that.
owner-occupied.
Yeah, I didn't know
and
that.
if you are in fear of potentially being foreclosed upon for whatever reason, whether it's a bank or whoever, they have a counseling program around that too, so that way you can become educated on what your options are. So we do spend quite a bit of money to make sure that those options are available for our community.
Now, to speak with my experience with the city of Schenectady homes, I sell them. I sell them once they've been rehabbed. I buy them for myself. I had you and Mayor McCarthy go through that house on 6th Ave. I was very, very proud of that house. I do work I'm proud of, because it always comes back to bite you if you're not proud of your work. You're always going to have repercussions by putting something out there that you're not proud of, right?
Yeah.
Trying to sneak it away. But I know that last year we were looking at roughly 700 to speak to how people have dug themselves out of the hole.
Yeah.
This is the shining glimmer of hope here, right? Is that from the beginning there was right around 700 homes of people that were starting of the foreclosure action post-COVID was going through, and I believe of those 700, right around 600 people were able to clear their debts, and some of them last minute or even pre-last minute, because Andrew and the city attorneys cannot foreclose on 105 houses in a day. It's a process, and every piece of the process. So
not only is it a process, built into the process is a period for you to answer, right? And it's a whole legal thing, so I won't get into detail with that on how you file an answer and stuff like that. But you have the opportunity to say, hey, this is going on, and for the city to be able to look at that. Or if you are selling it, maybe inform us ahead of time, like, hey, this is already listed for sale, so that way we're aware of that in that process. Or if you're going through bankruptcy, which is an option that a lot of people have too, that's the opportunity for your attorney to then start communicating those things. Because what happens is not just you, but if you have like a mortgage or anybody else who has what I would call like an ownership interest in your home, everybody gets the notice. So it's not just you as the homeowner. Your bank would get the notice too if you have a lien on there for any reason. If you've had any kinds of grants where they've put a lien on your home, everybody gets that notice.
I see. So any lien holder gets notified.
Yes.
All right. But I want to point out that 600 out of 700 is about 90%. So 90% of the people that started a foreclosure action were able to avoid it.
Yes.
That's huge. That's incredible. Because as an agent that makes money on selling these, I would much rather have people stay in their homes.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
I mean, opportunity is great, but I don't want someone to lose their home for that opportunity. Like, my goal is to have people stay in their homes if possible, and then if and when they're ready to sell or buy, to be there.
I think that's why we essentially try to run out the complete time frame that we have to make that decision as the city, because the city doesn't want to be in the business of taking people's properties, in the business of selling properties. That's not the goal here at all. We want there to be responsible homeowners who are empowered and have resources in order to help them. And when hard times come, that we hope that they're educated and that we are putting enough funds and resources toward educating them so they know what their options are, even if they come across that type of barrier.
Now, I know the city doesn't want to be in home ownership, and I used to think banks were that way as well. But then I started seeing in the last couple years when banks were taking back property, either however they did it, whatever way they did it, that they'd come in and they'd change carpets and they'd change fixtures and they'd repaint walls. I've never seen a bank in a foreclosure action until recently go in and do a minor flip.
No. There's reasons for that.
Well, I know. So your experience before the city's in banking, I do want to get there. I want to get the but I mean, besides trying to recoup the money they've invested, I mean, because the bank owns a property if it goes out. Is it just saying, holy cow, these people beat their house up, but we need to just bring it back to a marketability so we can recoup? Or, I mean, tell me more about.
So from a bank's perspective, there was a time where, from the way I look at it, a lot of banks, if they take a property, it becomes very difficult for you to figure out like who you're supposed to contact often, right? Because they don't necessarily get listed. Or if they're on a list, you can't just go to that bank's website, right? So if you go to that bank's website, you may or may not find any links to properties that they potentially own. You kind of have to already know who to contact or what that process looks like. And that happens with a lot of larger banks because everything is like kind of siloed. So there's like these small divisions. You can't just walk into some random bank, talk to the banker sitting at the desk or the teller, and ask them for a list of the properties that bank owns.
But you can. The city of Schenectady, right? Or at least the ones you're selling.
We're not a bank.
An institution, right?
Yeah.
So if someone who didn't want to look online wanted to go to the city of Schenectady, they could get a list of both houses and vacant land available for sale, right?
Yeah.
And that's from your office? Is that you?
Yeah, so, I print the list.
You print the list?
So, my office, ultimately just me.
I see. Just you. One-man office. I like it.
Yeah, no. I'm under the Department of Development.
Okay.
In planning. So, I'm not a planner or anything like that. But because I'm under that department, that's where I sit. It's on the second floor of the city. Well, I guess it's technically the third floor if you count the ground floor. But so I digress, though. So in our office, room 206, Department of Planning and Development, we have physical lists that we've already printed for you.
Yep.
Often I'll also put a stack of those lists downstairs right at the entrance. So when you come into the city, there's like a little 3-tiered shelf, and we will put a bunch of different resources often there. If there's any events coming up, a lot of times we'll put a sign there too. I know like some neighborhood groups and some landlord groups will like put their sign out there as far as what they have coming up. And then I also put the list of the city-owned properties right there too. Just so like if you're coming for just that,
you don't have to go.
I don't want you to have to walk up the stairs. I don't mind. You can.
Yep.
Some people specifically want a chance to talk to me. Sometimes their questions aren't the ones I can answer. Sometimes I can give you some guidance. It just depends on what the question is. I usually prefer appointments so I can really cut out time for you because otherwise you kind of got to catch me, right? So,
Yeah.
because I do deal with a bunch of different homeowners, home buyers, a lot of times different realtors. I might be dealing with different nonprofits. So, it can very easily, you can miss me by seconds often. So if it's something that you kind of want to have a sit-down conversation for, great. If you want to try your luck and just pop up, awesome. If for any reason I'm not available, you can get my card. It's sitting right there at the front. Any one of our team members, and they're all awesome. And a lot of them know pieces of what I do anyway. They may not be the expert or handling it specifically, but they can point you in the right direction. And then right on the wall, we have resources for landlords, homeowners, owner-occupied homeowners, home buyers. And then also on that wall is a list of the city-owned properties, both the vacant lots and then the ones that have structures.
Now, vacant lots usually sell. You always want to sell those, or to my understanding, to a neighboring house.
No.
So is
Sorry.
that not true? No, please.
Sorry.
Because in my mind, because I had a client that bought a house on Eagle, and I helped them get their paperwork to buy the adjoining lot to turn it into theirs.
So what happens is on that list of the vacant lots, I do take an extra step to write on there what the zoning is, as well as whether or not, based on just the lot size, is it considered buildable or not.
Okay.
A lot that's not buildable means you would not, based on the rules to build the space that's needed to be able to build a house on those cities' rules, are allowed to build a house there. Now, that doesn't mean you can't seek a variance, permission to be able to do something anyway. But on face value, based off of strictly the size of that lot, it is either considered buildable from my perspective or not buildable. If it is not buildable, then yes, we're looking at those adjacent neighbors as the preferred buyer. Now, there are some times where somebody may approach the city over a non-buildable lot, and they may have some other purpose that they want to use it for. And a lot of times those are really unique situations. Some people may do gardens. Some people, I don't know, even a sculpture park or whatever. So you may approach us about that, and that's what you're putting in for the offer.
Is that a real example? Have you sold a non-buildable for a sculpture park?
Well, they bought a bunch of them.
I'm just super curious because.
So I don't know
That's
last time
interest-
you've
that's
been on
interesting for me.
Hamilton Hill, but there's a sculpture park over on Hamilton Hill that Hamilton Hill Arts Center did. So essentially, they approached the city about doing a sculpture park because they saw a lot. It was originally split between multiple lots.
Okay.
So those non-buildable lots got merged, and then that space there became a sculpture park.
I see.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I think they have a sculpture of Ogun, which is I think the Yoruba god of ironcraft and art or something like that. I'm probably completely wrong, but I think it was pretty cool.
I want to go back to what determines buildable because a lot of houses are sitting on a 25 by 100 foot lot is probably an average, or 40 by 100, somewhere in that range.
So 40 by 100 would probably be considered buildable, depending on the zoning and everything else.
If I want to do a micro house, 800 square foot, 400 square foot, 395 square foot, I was talking to a bartender yesterday. She lives in a sub 400 square foot house.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a lot of space for 400 square feet.
Not to you, but the rule itself is not set based on how just simply how big you plan on building the house. So someone did from a I guess you would call him a philanthropist or something, but he approached us about purchasing a lot before, and he was like, well, I'm just going to build a small house on it, and I want to do that with a lot of your small lots. In his mind, which I think is a logical way of thinking, if the lot is not big enough to build a standard home, build something that will fit on that lot.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that was part of my question there.
Yeah.
Is how do
but
we?
That's not how the rule is actually set
How
up
do we use that rule to still find a way to put something on that? Is
You
kind of
don't
my question.
in that situation.
Is use variances?
You could attempt to do a use variance for that, but there's too many rules, and that's something really a planner and the zoning officers would get into more detail with. But if the rule says that you need X amount of frontage, right? So from the street, the front part of the property, left to right, you need to have 40 feet. It's either 40 or 45. Pretty sure it's 40. If it's less than that, essentially the rule is says no, you can't do that. So if it's less than that, you now need a variance. But you need a variance for every rule that you can't meet because that house is too small.
So you might find something where you want to do what we're talking about, or proposing, but you might need four variances for it. Size, shape, setbacks, locations, or whatever. You might have a
how far
whole
back is from the
scrapbook
street,
of it.
setbacks, the amount of square footage space that could be something, the height of the building, all of those things, all of the rules about how much space is supposed to be used to build something.
Yeah.
Every rule that you're not going to meet, you now need a variance for.
I mean,
and whether or not you can get that variance, you can always apply. Don't get me wrong.
to be honest, it seems like a fun challenge now. Like what you just put out there. So I play a lot of games, and it's my games are rules heavy, right? As long as you find creative ways to work with and through the rules. I mean, what you're describing here is, hey, if someone wanted to build 5 mini houses, we could say, okay, these are the variances for each single lot we need. Here is a cookie cutter. Here's the A house I want to build and the B house I want to build, and here are my plans, and let's go. And maybe certain areas get a yes on some, and certain areas get a no on others. I mean, that to me, that sounds kind of fun.
Well, yeah, as long as you're willing to pay the fee for each variance you need.
Not me, not me, right?
Yeah, the thing to be mindful of, it's many things so a variance means that you're doing something that the rule does not already cover, right? So the rule says no, you're getting a variance to get a yes anyway, right? So there's a whole process with that. That often means that you're hiring people in order to help you get those plans together ahead of time. That also means that you're paying for the application for each variance that you do. And then ultimately the zoning board or the planning board, and often you might need both. So there's variances that you need from each of those entities, right? And those are different groups of people, and they have their own rules of what they're allowed to say yes or no to. One of the biggest things that I've noticed where people falter when it comes to variances is you can't really create a situation where, like, a choice limiting action, right? So if you already own something, you're expected to do it within those rules. So if you buy something and then try to go to get the variances, you're less likely to be approved.
While knowing or not knowing about it, right? Because ignorance is no excuse on that, right? So it would be fun, though, to have a package saying, hey, this is the plan. This is everything through, because I use an e-signature type program. I can literally build a package and say, hey, this house and this house, here's the package, and send it out for signature and say, look, you're going to need $400, and these are the plans you got to propose to everybody or whatever.
Yeah, the city actually gives you guidance on it in general. So the packet that you need to submit for a variance says everything that they need in there for you. It even tells you what types of professionals that you'll likely need in order to get that done if you're not yourself qualified to be able to do that.
So I really just look at this as a challenge.
You're looking, so to bring it back to when the city is trying to sell a non-buildable lot, there is the person who has this really creative thing that they want to do on a non-buildable lot, right? And then you may have the neighbor who needs a driveway because there was never an existing driveway there.
Sure.
Yours is a maybe. Theirs is a yes. We know that's allowed.
So we just got to be first.
So the council has the ultimate decision as to whether or not they sell it to you. So it's not a hard and fast yes or no, but I think the reality of it is, if it already meets the rules, that is a point in that person's side.
Let me get down to a really nitty-gritty question. Then, if you had two houses that neither of them had driveways, could those two neighbors come together and say, hey, we want to buy this non-buildable lot, and split them up and each get a driveway?
So what will actually happen is when you submit, so whether you're the neighbor or not, right? If it's a non-buildable lot and you submit an offer, a letter will go out to those adjacent neighbors.
No way. Cool.
Right. So the letter will go out to adjacent neighbors, and I know people have like different feelings about that. But ultimately, the council's concern is that those neighbors may or may not be aware that the city is the one who owns that lot. And they may or may not be aware that that is even an option for them.
Yep.
So that's why that letter goes out, just to make sure if they did have interest that we're making sure to consider each of those options. So the letter will go out to them. Some neighbors have come together before and said, hey, we want to buy this together because we're going to split it up anyway.
Okay.
Between the two of us so that we both can have a driveway because we didn't have one before.
All right.
And sometimes that other neighbor has a driveway already and doesn't care. And the other neighbor does respond and they want to have their offer considered. So that does occur. Now, when a lot says buildable, it's a slightly different situation, because if it's a buildable lot, then that means potentially a house can get dropped there, right? Or someone can build a new mixed-use residence, or maybe they're trying to build an office space, whatever they're trying to do. As long as it's within the allowable zoning is really what you want to look at, and whether or not you need a variance. But so some people will buy those and say, hey, I'm building a house here. So inherently now, because it's a buildable size lot, that neighbor's not the preferred buyer in that situation necessarily.
Yeah, situations change, so the how you dispose of the property and how you send it out matters different, and it has different.
Yes.
All right.
Non-buildable, those neighbors will be notified.
I see.
If it's a buildable lot, those neighbors aren't necessarily always aware that that occurs. I mean, of course, it still goes before council so that they see that that's going to occur if you pay attention to any of the city council meetings or look at those agendas.
All right. So I want to talk about how we know each other, right? We know each other because I buy and sell a lot of city properties for myself and my clients. I'm working on my second one right now on Lang Street, north of Hoosick. Not north of Hoosick. Oh my God, it's Troy. North of Union. And, for me, I love it. But I know you as someone who is really good at getting into the fine details of the offers I put out. And that's because you sit on the PMC.
Yeah, the Property Management Committee.
Right. Thank you. I knew you were going to break that down for me. So property taken, they've had time, they were unable to or unwilling to find a way out. The city has taken the property. Let's skip the any legal sending in between there. The city now owns it. Does the city markets with real estate agents?
Yes. So the
most of the
primary way
properties.
that we sell our properties is through marketing with realtors, and that's
Okay.
largely because of the mayors want to involve the real estate community. That's
Yep.
how we find more responsible buyers often, and making sure that they have other contacts and resources as well. So it's a partnership between our real estate community. We have strong relationships with GCAR. We have strong relationships with multiple brokerages. So the mayor likes having that opportunity. Also, I like the fact that it helps educate realtors to be able to assist their other clients.
It also, in my mind, it gives the city a lot of free employees, because in my mind,
Well, paying you anyway.
well, yes, but a lot of us are here not just during the sale. Like I do a lot of post-sale support. If it's, hey, do I have any contractors recommend? Hey, what's your recommendation here? With my construction background, I love it. I want to find people who are successful. There are sometimes, I'm obligated to put offers in on behalf of my clients, and there's sometimes I'm always nervous, or not always. Sometimes I'm nervous about which buyers are buying the property because they have no experience. And I'm like, look, at any point you need help, please reach out to me. I had a client recently say they prepaid a contractor and they left with some of the money without finishing the job, and that hurt my feelings. It wasn't one of the people that I would have recommended. I didn't know who they used, but if it's the first time doing something, it's completely okay to reach out to someone else for help. And I'm sure that you would answer the phone and say, hey, I bought a city property, I'm falling behind, could you guide me in this direction? Now, I know even if I was the world's best electrician, which I don't do that at all, I'm not a Sparky, city properties have to be repaired by city certified or licensed electricians and plumbers, right? So
Electricians and plumbers specifically
Okay.
are the ones that at this time where there's a license involved with it. So you couldn't get Joe Schmo, the plumber, who nobody knows is really a plumber, but happens to know how to do the work to do it. They have to actually come into the city and actually become certified.
Now, once they become certified, if some plumber or electrician was a bad actor and ran away with the money, it was a general contractor carpenter in this case, would they get their name pulled from the certified list?
So that list is maintained by code enforcement.
Okay.
So you would want to report them to the building inspector
Okay.
about the situation, and then that office would handle that. So I really can't say 100%.
So generally though, because there is a way to file a complaint and there is a way to get, quite possibly and maybe even likely, that person pulled from the list of contractors, right? If a complaint could lead to an investigation. An investigation could lead to a suspension or a timeout, if you will. Is it probably more safe to say than the people who are on that list are usually good actors, because bad actors may get that name removed?
I don't know, and I don't want to like mislead anybody or whatever.
Well,
that process.
I hope one day we get to work with the code department on the show and talk to them about that, because I'm going to bring that up then.
Well, definitely, I definitely say that's something that you should parking lot really definitely as a really good question to ask, because I think it's something that most people want to know. Like they want to know who are the good contractors, who can they trust, right? The problem comes about is that the city can't necessarily recommend anybody.
Sure.
And a lot of issues between a homeowner or home buyer and their contractor are civil matter issues, which we can't involve ourselves in.
Sure. And it's probably in a lot of cases, we cause our own luck. Good luck or bad luck, it's almost always our own fault, right? It's either we worked hard or we were snippy with someone and now we're...
It's possible, but it gets into a lot of right and wrongs, whether or not it's legal or not, whether or not it's a miscommunication or not. Is it covered in your contract? All things that really come down to civil matters, and the city doesn't involve itself in civil matters with that. Because you literally, like, if a contractor runs away with your money, or a contractor does something that they're not supposed to do and it's a violation of your contract, you have to sue them. Like that is your recourse, is to be able to sue them, and that's how you get your money back, and that's how, I can't, so I usually recommend people that, especially if you don't have necessarily the resources to move forward with that, or maybe hire your own attorney, that's when you would contact, like legal aid or something, because those are free services where they will give you advice, and so that you can make a more informed decision as to what your next step would be.
Cool. You did mention something. You said resources. I want to talk about what it takes to now put an offer in for the city. Okay. If I see a property for $50,000, I can buy it for $50,000 cash that day, right?
No.
Okay.
Nothing happens the same day.
I get asked that question very often.
Oh, me too.
If I drive up with $50,000 tomorrow, I want the deed by Friday.
Yeah, not likely.
Why not?
Well, one, because the group that says yes or no is the city council, and the city council has to make decisions within certain timeframes based on what's already laid out on their schedule.
Okay.
Right. So if you try to make an offer today and you wanted it by Friday, the city council is not actually going to say yes or no, or even review your offer until Monday at the committee meeting. Sure. At the committee meeting, they discuss it. It is a closed session, so it's an executive session because it's in negotiations. So once the city council has made a decision as to who they're likely to go forward with, if they don't have any conditions that they want to inform that person of, at their next city council meeting is when they have to make public their decision.
I see. So the reason I want to bring that up is because, one, seems like you also have that same phone call. Hey, I'm ready to buy it.
I've had people like send me a picture of a check and they're like, I'm buying this for this amount of money.
I can be there in 5 minutes with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's no.
But I want to ask about the reserve amount. I know it's going to be a sore topic. How does that number get made?
So that number is made based on the grade that was assigned to that property by code enforcement. Okay. So it's not a number that should be confused with the amount of money that you're going to spend to rehab a property. Okay. You could be spending more or less. And especially because it's largely dependent on your choices when you're rehabbing a property. Sure. We don't know your choices ahead of time, so we really could not tell you that, and we're not contractors, so we can't tell you 100% how much it's going to cost for everything.
My deflection for that is, how much does a car cost? And people are like, well, I don't have an answer for that, because I don't make the decisions for you. Yeah. Every rehab I do is full gut rehab. I don't care. I want to buy them cheap enough that I can replace everything, and if I get lucky, I save money. I'd rather say I didn't need to replace the sill plates, the roof has 10 years of life left, and I actually got one of the hot water tanks to turn back on. Yeah. What a day.
But I think it's the simplest and the best way for a lot of people.
It's safer that way than say I need this furnace to work, and it doesn't work. I don't have $8,000 to replace the furnace, run new ducting, and whatever. I'd rather be on the safe side than be right on the edge and then be $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 short. Yeah. Right? So now I know not everyone does full gut rehabs. Man, I don't know if every house should have a full gut rehab. It's not for me to say how someone else cooks their turkey for Thanksgiving. That's not up to me.
No, but I do understand it. And people have different strategies when they're looking at our properties, right? So I have a few people that I know for a fact based on what they've told me, as they operate more similarly to you. Before ever looking at the property, they already think that they're spending 100, 200,000 per unit in a property.
Yep.
And they work backwards from that.
Yep.
And that's how they figure out how much they want to offer for it, right? Now, the reality of it is, in today's market, because of the lack of inventory, you have a lot of people you end up potentially competing against. Now, there's some properties that may have one offer on them.
Yep.
And the likelihood of that offer being able to move forward is very high in a lot of those situations. But if you've got 10 other people trying to bid on the house, like the city may list it at 50,000, say, right? So we consult with our realtor. Our realtor will do the market research. They suggest the listing price. They give us the reasoning for that listing price. And then that's how that number gets determined for how much we're going to list it for. The reserve amount is based on the grade of a property, which is why the numbers always seem like several properties may be around the same number.
Yep.
And they're not like often like a random number that's like in 98 cents.
Yeah, so
that's why
they're not running a per square foot so many dollar amount kind of calculation, saying, hey, here's a rough ballpark. It's going to be a lot. Bring some money.
Is this extremely poor,
Yep.
fair, good, right? Is essentially what they're rating each individual component of a house, and then that is what determines what the overall property rating becomes, which then pops in a number for them.
Yep. So it's almost a more automatic. Like once the grade's done, you kind of have a range or an exactly set number, and there it is. Okay, cool.
It's an equation that's in the system, and the equation, again, is not reflective. That number's still never going to be reflective, I would argue, of how much money you will likely spend in it. So the reason we have the number, though, is to make sure that people have some funds to start that work. Now, some people finance, right? Some people have a lot of cash money to be able to throw into a property if they choose to. And they may or may not choose to disclose all of their money and their resources to us at the time of purchase, right? But this is so that the city at least knows that you have something to start with.
Sure.
Right? Because there's a time frame. Like we give you a time frame for how long to
Perfect
fix
segue.
the property.
Tell me the two. See, I know, but tell me the two time frames and what differentiates those two, and what happens if you're a day late, or 6 months late, or a year late. Like let's dig into that.
So there's two general categories of a buyer of our properties, right? You're likely either a investor, or you're going to be an owner occupant, right? Or you're going to be using it as your primary residence. You're going to be living there, right? If you are an investor, we tell you you need to do this in 6 months.
Yep. Which is an aggressive time frame for some of these properties.
Oh yeah, intentionally so.
Yeah.
So you got 6 months to fix it up. Now, if for some reason you're running late on that 6 months, which you're going to know, most professionals would know that, hey, it doesn't look like that's likely for me to hit that deadline. If you communicate with us, they will give you an extension. And you tell them what date. So you would have to communicate to our attorneys and let them know, like, hey, I'm going to need an extra 4 or 5 months on this, or an extra 6 months on this, right? We're all for helping extend that time frame if necessary.
As long as there's good faith progress, right? Like if I haven't started.
Yeah. If you haven't started
And I'm like,
all,
hey, I'm going to need 3 more years. On this bad boy.
you probably have already started getting contacted from our attorneys.
I see.
So generally speaking, if you're an investor, you're getting that 6 months. If you need longer, communicate with us. Generally speaking, it's usually a yes.
Yep.
And we're going to do it, right? As long as you're making some type of good faith effort.
Yeah. Right? And I want to put that good faith effort out there. It's not something I would say is a definable, like, this is the metric that you're exactly where we want to be.
Yeah. But where, like, you have to, and that's why you.
But show me some effort.
Where you are in that process.
It's like, show me the work when you're doing a math question, right? It's like the answer obviously matters. But if you've shown me like a bunch of effort and you're real close, or you forgot to carry the 1, that's way more forgivable than me just putting 27.
Yeah.
For who knows what kind of math problem. So, I think one of my biggest things as a real estate agent as well is I want my clients to have a little excitement in the process. I'll be like, I'll just buy the house and whatever, and there's no love or excitement there. I'm then worried what it's going to be like. Do I have to drag them to closing? Do I have to call their bank on their behalf? So when I'm working with a city home purchase, I want someone to say, Dave, I've talked to 2 architects are ready. I've got my electrician lined up. I called 2 roofers. Do you have a third roofer? Because everyone seems to be 6 months out. Can you help me with this stuff? I always get a little bit worried. Is like we're a week or 2 before closing, and they're like, "Oh, goodness, I guess it's going to happen."
Well, that could also factor into whether or not you get a yes or no also from the city.
Tell me what that means. I don't know what that means.
So on the offer form that we have everybody fill out, right? So you have to do your contract like any other situation, right? We also ask for a few other supporting documents, and there's reasons for that. Those supporting documents are generally used in order to confirm if you own any other properties that are in the city of Schenectady that I need to look up. Because if you're not doing well with the existing properties you already own, we have no interest in selling to you either.
Yeah, if you're a bad actor, you don't get to have.
So,
more
like, if
profits.
you're already behind on your taxes, we clearly tell everybody you need to be up to date on your taxes when we're looking at these offers.
Sure.
Right? If you have violations now, whether big or small, you need to get those corrected.
Yep.
Right. Otherwise, why would we sell to you as opposed to someone who doesn't have those issues?
True. Yeah. No. I've actually seen where, say, hey, if you want your offer accepted, I need you to go right now, pay off this piece of tax debt that you've got leaned on your property, because it's going to go forward soon. And I think you've caught it for one of my clients and done that, saying, hey, we just did our little due diligence. Seems like you owe us some money.
Surprisingly, it's actually the thing that probably takes up the majority of my day.
No doubt, really.
Is looking through all of the offers, because it's often that people are either missing documents that they've given us, they forget to disclose properties. I don't think they do it intentionally. I think they just forget.
Yep.
Or say you own a property under an LLC or something. So in your mind, I'm buying it under my name. Why does that matter about the LLC? It's because you own the LLC. It's because you control the LLC.
The controlling interest is the same person.
Exactly.
It's just hidden.
So that's
by
what
name.
we're asking for. That's why we want the tax return, the federal forms and stuff. Now, once you have those supporting documents that we've asked you for, you've got your proof of funds, you've got your contract, there's an offer form, right? Yep. The offer form on it asks you just to understand what your intentions are. Right. So we ask you, are you going to be an owner occupant? Are you going to be an investor who's going to be renting it out to other community members? Are you going to be, are you going to look to flip it? Are you going to be a rehab and then sell it? So you will check off one of those boxes. Also on that form, it asks you, do you have a contractor? Right. It's a yes or no question. And then if you do have one, we ask you to disclose who the contractor is.
Yep.
Right. It's not a required thing. However, if you, David versus Joe, and you both have the exact same offer, the exact same amount of funds, but you've done extra due diligence and your contract has actually gone through that property and the other person did not,
Yep.
That could sway the vote the other way.
Yep. Now, as a repeat client, personally for the city of Schenectady, I like doing, and this is for people working with me here, I like doing, hey, this is what I planned for flooring. Hey, this is what I planned for lighting fixtures. I'm going to use granite. Why would you use granite in a rental? Because not everyone knows you can't put a hot pan on a plastic coated piece of wood.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want you cutting on the granite, because you can still mark it, you can still score it, but it's going to last a lot better than,
it's one of the most durable materials.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's going to last. So if you do it right once, this could be a property that could last you literally a generation before you have to go in there and really put more effort into it. Which is why I like the full gut, because I'm looking to give these to my kids. They might still get like a beat up Honda Accord when they turn a certain age, but I want to give them generational wealth creation with a piece of property. So
I think that's why a lot of people who previously never used to consider purchasing properties that needed to be rehabbed are now looking at that.
The other thing is you are now marketing properties that weren't available before, and we are on listings year to date down 40.1% as of end of October. So there is nothing else out there, which is why we talked about why everything has to be filled out and why there's multiple offers on the majority of the properties. When you said you've had one that, a couple of properties that had few offers, I'm amazed.
Well, it's really because of just the mindset of the people themselves.
Yeah.
So certain properties just end up being more popular. So everybody's competing for those properties, and because they're doing that, it's rare you have somebody who's putting an offer on every property. It doesn't really happen too often.
I was going on vacation a year and a half ago, and I was in the airport in one of those little work while on vacation little hubs, and I remember I sent 8 offers out for the same client. We got one. Of those 8, we got one, did a great rehab. He made money. I got to sell it, loved it. we hadn't even looked at them. I got lucky. I was like, we walked in that property for the first time. We're like, we did good. It was exciting for me. But yeah, I mean, if you get to a point where you say, hey, put $5,000 every building, I'm like, you're only gonna get one, right? You only get one property. It's the first one.
Something that I want to ask you.
Please, yeah, let's go for it.
So you said you get a lot of calls on the Cary Street property.
Oh my God, dude!
Right? How many
Absolutely.
other properties that are city owned did you get calls on?
So I advertise in 2 zip codes, and then my website covers the capital region. cleartoclosehomes.com. Little selfless plug in there. Number 2, by the way. I advertise in 12308, which is where Cary Street lives. And I had no less than 2 to 3 dozen calls in a week and a half, 2 weeks. Okay. It was like every time I picked up the phone, it's like, hey, man, let me just ask you this.
So,
are you ready to hear what I think the rehab cost is going to be? I'm like, I'm full gut for me, it's $265. They're like, what it says 100K or 90K. I'm like, great, go with that. Or go with the person that's been in there 7 times this week. I'm going to be in there 7 times next week. And thank you for bringing it up. My client got the offer.
So let me ask you a question.
Please.
At that same time, how many people approached you about the property on Vale Place, which was also listed around?
I have shown that twice.
All right. So
That's
twice
it,
versus
twice.
just twice. Right?
Yes.
And then how many people did you ask you about the property on Lansing?
So that property in Lansing, I'm a bigger guy.
Mm-hmm.
When I go in that kitchen in the back on the first floor, it's one at a time.
Yeah, but how many people called you to ask?
One in 6 months.
Okay.
One.
And then there was another property on Bailey. How many did you get to ask you about that?
Bailey. Mm-hmm. It's the first I'm hearing of it.
Exactly.
0.
So now most of those properties got listed around the same time.
Yeah, 0.
So everybody's competing over one property, and then all those other properties they haven't come back to look at because your heart's set on something, right? That's often what happens in the mentality of a person. But it's you and 20 other people who are.
Vale is cool. Vale is cool. I don't know what you'd have to do with that burned down garage in the back. If that could be saved, that would have a huge value as like a contractor's place to have like a little shop above and storage on the first floor, and and if you could cut some of the stuff down and look over that fence, you'd have a phenomenal view. That's a cool property, man. That's really cool.
So, but that's what happens is you get more people who are only looking at one property and they haven't considered any other options for them. Whereas, like I have, there's a particular buyer who's also a contractor, and what he does is now he literally lowballs every offer that he puts in. Right, but he lowballs and then sends to every single property when he's looking.
Yeah.
So, like, if there's 10 properties, he's putting in 10 offers on all 10 properties, and he is crossing his fingers and hoping. But he's also looking at it from the same perspective you do: is that I'm going to spend $100,000 to $200,000 per unit because I'm going to do a full gut rehab anyway.
Yep.
Right. So then, the very real possibility of him getting something with that lowball offer skyrockets because he's put in offers on all of them.
Absolutely.
Similar to what your client did.
So my argument I make all the time, and it's one of the arguments that I have a hard time reconciling with the city of Schenectady mentally and emotionally is, and I was telling people if I were to put, and this is the caveat, if I was going to put an offer on Cary, I told everyone, if I put an offer in, it's going to be like 18,000. Because if I put in 90 or 100, I don't have the money left to put in my 265 rehab. And I was, in my mind, the per unit, 2 bed, 1 bath, beautiful in every single way, is worth right around 110, 120 a unit. There's no backyard, there's no parking, but you're 50 feet from the college. And that was my per unit valuation. I'm 60 grand before I leave the basement. That money's spent before I even get to the units. And if I was 300,000 in and it valued at 440, heaven forbid 400, then at 75% loaned value, I could pull out and not have any of my own money in there. And that's where I want to be, is where I can bird these properties, which is a buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat strategy where you buy, you fix, you rent, it becomes a higher valuation, you borrow money against that. The goal is to be able to own and control 50 properties without a dollar in, once you refinance. But if I paid 100 for it and I refinance, I'm going to have $80,000 of my own money in that one property. And that shuts the engine off. That means I can't go to the next until I earn that 80,000 back. And my argument was, hey, if I put an 18,000 offer in, which I disclose to anyone who puts the offer in or is talking about it, say, hey, before you put a number out there, if I can find the right financing, this will be my number. Now we'll talk anything you want. I won't change my number. I'd be like, I was going to write the letter and say, look, these are my fixtures. This is what I'll finish, and I'll hold it for 20 years, and you're going to be proud that you sold this to me in 20 years. But it's going to hurt on day one when you take an offer 82,000 less than the other one I put in for my other client. It's going to hurt for a while, but in 20 years you're going to be happy because I still control it.
So, I mean, it comes down more so toward what the value is for the individual. I think an investor is going to look at things slightly differently than a person who's going to live in it. But I think people should be considering more so of what means I have.
Yep.
What's the actual value of the property after repair?
Yep.
As well as the reality of the market that's going on.
Yep.
So I do think all those things are important. And there's one thing we did. I know we touched on the time frames a bit. When it comes to if you're going to be an owner occupant in a home, though, you have a minimum of a year to fix it up. And
Minimum or a maximum? Because
you
it's
have a
sold to me as
year
a
based
maximum.
on the contract. Like, so
Yeah.
the contract says how much time, right? So
Yeah.
the investor says 6 months. For the owner occupant, it says 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
If you need longer, you need to be communicating with us.
Yeah,
And
don't go all silent and show some
it is
progress.
potential that we would give you the extension. It's actually very likely if you're making good faith efforts
Yep.
that you would get an extension. But again, the communication has to be there. If we haven't heard from you in 6 months and all of a sudden you're about to expire on your agreement, and that's when you ask for the extension,
Yep.
it's not my decision, but I think that is something that is under the consideration.
Now that beep, in case anyone else heard that was our kind of our signal that we should be wrapping up. But I am so thankful for this opportunity to talk to you more. I think there was a couple things I didn't know, and I'm glad we went into it. The things I want to talk about that I'm hoping we might be able to get a part 2 with you, Maurice, if we can find time, is the actual timeline. Because I want to get into that. I want to talk about a couple other pieces and inspections. For those who haven't done building, it's something that I want to bring up down the road. But do you think I can schedule a part 2? And
We could probably definitely do that.
that's rocking.
I say probably definitely.
Probably. Well, I said 100% sometimes earlier. I'm like, wait, that doesn't work.
So a couple of things I think would be good. So I'm just making a note to myself.
Yeah, sure.
As to part 2. Like subject matter for the podcast and the different things. And I think that it's important when it comes to the community and anybody else listening and watching this. If there's a particular subject that you think is related to whether you're a home buyer, a homeowner, whether you're living in the house, whether you're potentially going to be buying a house to live in if you're a first-time home buyer, or even if you're an investor or a landlord or a property manager, what types of questions you might have that you want to pose and want to see on the show.
Absolutely.
It's going to be big.
I was in Cohoes City Hall the other day on like Tuesday or Thursday, somewhere in there. It was after our show, so it must have been like a Wednesday or Thursday. And I met a security guard that he just penned and illustrated a cartoon, graphic novel.
Oh, okay.
And I asked him if I could get, some of his stuff up here and show it. Guys, we still have this that was here, longer before the show was. We're looking to fill this. So if anyone's listening, they want to put a little something up there, of course, we got to clear it. You can't be, offensive or rude or gross or whatever. But I mean, we have space. We're doing outreach, guys. Let us know what you want to hear. Tell us, hey, when you talk to this person, you mentioned this, but you didn't get an answer. I want to see some community involvement because, Maurice knows his job. I know mine. It's great that we get to talk, and we already had some working knowledge of each other. But I want to know what we may have missed. So I do want to see appropriate and professional questions put wherever we end up posting this.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm big on, especially, I'm looking at this more like when I have one-on-one meetings with people.
Yep.
I tell them all the time, I say, you don't have to doctor your question to me.
Yep.
All right. Whatever way in which you choose to ask it, I'll clean up how you probably should ask the question in the future myself. Yeah. So, because I know the subject matter well enough.
Yeah.
Right. So ask it how you need to ask it to make sure that we understand what it is you want to know.
Sure.
And we'll doctor the question up if necessary. I prefer to keep them as raw as possible, and be able to get you that answer. Because I tell people all the time, the world isn't about whether or not your question is a smart question or a dumb question. And some people will tell you there are no dumb questions. I think that's not true. There are plenty of dumb questions in this world. But at the end of the day, you're still going to be the only one who doesn't know. So ask your dumb question if you want
Ask
to.
if you want the answer. Don't hope that we bump into the question and or just randomly talk about it. Pose it, ask it, and if we get the chance, we'll discuss it.
Exactly. Yeah. But we are planning out for the next few months of what types of guests that you guys might want to have on the show, and what kind of questions may be relevant. And then we want to move to displaying your question. So if you've posted it on social media or something, take a little screenshot of that, make sure it's up there so we acknowledge who's asked the question. If you want, we can also do that too.
Yep. And now this is our last show until the new year.
Yes.
So you're the last guest. So part 2 is going to be next year.
Yeah.
At least that far. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Yep. All that good stuff.
Everything that we're supposed to say. I hope you have a restful time away from the city and away from work and with your family and we're all going to continue to work. I'm sure you're going to answer emails occasionally when you probably should be taking time off. I know I answer calls when I should be taking time off.
Yeah.
But I'm excited what the new year brings, and I'm excited for this conversation to see what other properties come up. I know there's a bunch more coming, and hopefully what we've talked to today gives us a leadway into the next section of listings that come out from the city.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you for your time. Also great to see you.
Always good to have a good conversation with you.
It's fun. Guys, I think that's it. Thank you. The Green Market and the Farmers Market is here in Proctor's where we are.
Yes.
We know the Green Market's on Sundays, and
I believe the Farmers Market's on Tuesdays and
Thursdays. Cool. All right, that was it, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
That was fun.